Listen to me. This is not a gentle whisper. This is a trumpet sounding in your spirit. This is not entertainment. This is not a story to make you feel good and move on. This is a moment of awakening. God has been speaking. And the question before you right now is simple but terrifying. Are you listening, or are you too distracted, too comfortable, too busy to hear the warning that has been echoing in your heart? December 31 is not just a date on a calendar. It is a spiritual doorway. It is a line drawn by God between what was and what will be. And God does not open doors without speaking first. God does not mark seasons without purpose. God does not allow time to turn unless He is calling His people to attention. Many people think God only speaks in thunder and fire. But most of the time God speaks in pressure, in restlessness, in an uneasiness you cannot explain. That sleepless night you had, that sudden sense that time is running out, that feeling that something must change now, not later. That is not anxiety, that is not coincidence. That is God warning you, stirring you, calling you to wake up before the door closes behind you. God warned long before December 31 arrived. But many refused to listen because the warning did not come wrapped in fear. It came wrapped in mercy. God always warns before He acts. He warns before He shifts seasons. He warns before He exposes what is hidden. He warns before He removes what no longer belongs. But the tragedy of humanity is not that God is silent. The tragedy is that people stop listening once life becomes predictable. When comfort replaces conviction, ears grow dull. When routine replaces reverence, hearts grow slow. And yet God in His mercy keeps speaking. December 31 stands like a watchman at the gate of your life. It asks you a question you cannot escape. What have you done with the time God gave you? Not what did others do? Not what did circumstances do to you? What did you do with the breath God placed in your body? The opportunities God placed in your hands? The warnings God placed in your spirit? Time is the one gift God never reclaims once it passes. What is gone is gone. And God is calling you now before the clock turns to examine your life with brutal honesty. Some of you felt the warning months ago. You sensed a narrowing. Things that once felt easy became heavy. Doors that once opened without effort suddenly resisted you. Conversations began to feel hollow. Achievements stopped satisfying your soul. And instead of asking God what He was saying, you tried to escape the discomfort. You filled your days with noise. You filled your nights with distraction. But God does not compete with noise. He waits for silence. He waits for surrender. He waits for the moment you finally say, God, speak, because I cannot continue like this. God is not warning you to frighten you. God is warning you because He loves you too much to let you cross into a new season, carrying the same disobedience, the same pride, the same compromises that weakened you in the last one. December 31st is not magic, but it is meaningful. It is a mirror. It reflects back everything you ignored, postponed, or justified. And God is saying, do not step forward until you deal with what I already showed you. There are people listening right now who know exactly what God warned them about. You know the habit God told you to release. You know the relationship God told you to step away from. You know the bitterness God told you to forgive. You know the calling God told you to stop running from. But you delayed. You negotiated. You said later. And God, patient and kind, allowed time to pass. But patience does not cancel truth. Delay does not erase warning. December 31 arrives whether you are ready or not. God is not impressed by resolutions made without repentance. God is not moved by promises spoken without obedience. God is not fooled by words that are not followed by action. You can cross into a new year with old chains, or you can stop right now and let God break them. But do not deceive yourself into thinking time alone brings change. Only alignment with God brings transformation. Some people believe God only warns before judgment. That is not true. God warns before promotion. God warns before elevation. God warns before expansion. Because greater responsibility requires deeper alignment. God will not enlarge your life if your foundation is cracked. God will not pour abundance into a vessel that leaks character. God will not open greater doors while you refuse to close destructive ones. The warning before December 31 is not about fear. It is about preparation. God is saying, listen carefully, because the next season will demand more from you than the last one did. What once was optional will become essential. What once you could ignore will now determine your survival. What once God tolerated because of your immaturity, He will now confront because you are no longer ignorant. You have heard, you have felt, you have been warned. Do not misunderstand God's silence. Silence does not mean approval. Silence often means God has already spoken and He is waiting to see if you will obey. When God repeats Himself, it is mercy. When God stops repeating Himself, it is transition. December 31 marks a transition whether you acknowledge it or not. And God is asking you now, before the door turns, have you listened or have you only heard noise? Hearing is physical. Listening is spiritual. Hearing is passive. Listening demands response. Many people hear sermons, messages, advice, and warnings, but few listen with the intention to change. God is not looking for agreement. God is looking for obedience. Agreement says that is true. Obedience says I will act on it even when it costs me. And every warning from God carries a cost. The cost is always your ego, your comfort, or your excuses. There are things God warned you about that did not look dangerous at first. They seemed harmless, they seemed manageable, they seemed under control. But God sees what you cannot see. God sees where the road leads, not just where it begins. And when God warns, He is not reacting, He is protecting. Every warning ignored becomes a lesson learned the hard way. God would rather correct you now than repair you later. Some of you are wondering why the joy you once had feels distant, why prayer feels heavy, why peace feels interrupted, why motivation fades quickly. It is not because God left. It is because you walked past the warning and kept going. Conviction is not punishment. Conviction is God pulling you back before you fall too far. And if you feel it now, rejoice, because it means God is still speaking to you. December 31 is a spiritual checkpoint. God is asking you to stop running, stop pretending, stop postponing. Look at your life without filters. Look at your heart without excuses. Look at your patterns without denial. God already knows the truth. The question is whether you are brave enough to face it with Him. Do not say you had no warning. The warning came through repeated thoughts you tried to silence. It came through advice you dismissed. It came through delays you could not explain. It came through disruptions you labeled as bad luck. But nothing God allows is random. When God interrupts your routine, it is because your routine is blocking your destiny. God is not calling you to panic. God is calling you to position yourself. There is a difference. Panic scatters. Positioning aligns. Panic reacts. Positioning responds. God is not saying the end is near. God is saying the turning point is near. And turning points favor those who listen. Many people will cross December 31 unchanged. They will celebrate the date but miss the moment. They will count down seconds but ignore the warning. They will enter a new year with the same mindset, the same habits, the same spiritual distance. And they will wonder why nothing changes. But a few will stop. A few will listen. A few will say, God, whatever you are saying, I choose to obey. Those few will experience shifts. Others will not understand. God does not need numbers. God needs obedience. One obedient heart can change an entire future. One surrendered decision can redirect a lifetime. And sometimes that decision must be made before the clock changes, while conviction is still fresh and mercy is still loud. This is not about perfection. God never demanded perfection. This is about direction. Are you moving toward God or away from Him? Are your choices aligning with His voice or drowning it out? Are you responding to His warnings or rationalizing them? Direction determines destination, not intention. You can intend good and still end up lost if you ignore the signs. God is not impressed by how spiritual you sound. God is moved by how surrendered you live. You can speak about faith and still ignore God's warnings. You can appear disciplined and still resist correction. But God sees past appearances. God speaks to the heart, and the heart cannot hide. There are consequences to ignoring God, but there are also rewards to listening. Peace that does not depend on circumstances. Clarity that cuts through confusion. Strength that rises. W hand pressure increases. Direction that remains steady when others panic. God does not want to restrict you. He wants to free you. December 31 is not your enemy. It is your opportunity. It is the moment God gives you to stop, listen, and realign. You may not G. It's another warning like this. Not because God stops caring, but because God respects your choices. When warnings are ignored long enough, consequences become the teacher. If you feel unsettled right now, that is not condemnation. That is invitation. God is inviting you to respond while response is still easy. God is inviting you to humble yourself before life humbles you. God is inviting you to change direction before momentum makes turning painful. Do not wait for another sign. Do not ask for another confirmation. The warning itself is confirmation. The stirring in your spirit is confirmation. The urgency you feel is confirmation. God does not shout forever. He speaks clearly then waits. Right now, God is closer than you think. Not in emotion, but in intention. He is watching to see whether you will listen or scroll past. Whether you will reflect or distract yourself. Whether you will surrender or delay. One more time, heaven is quiet at this moment, waiting on your response. The most dangerous thing you can do is nothing. Not rebellion, not failure, nothing. Indifference, delay, comfort. Those are the enemies of obedience. And God is saying, choose now. Not tomorrow, not next year, now. December 31 is standing at your door, and God has already spoken. The warning was not vague. It was personal. It touched the exact area you avoid. And if you listen now, truly listen, you will not step into the next season the same person who entered this one. God is not bound by your calendar, but He uses time to test your obedience. He watches how you respond when the season shifts, when pressure increases, when clarity demands action. Many people want God to change circumstances, but God is watching to see if you will change posture, because when posture changes, direction follows. You cannot walk into a new season bent on the old weights and expect to stand strong. God is calling why? To straighten your spirit, to lift your eyes, to stop dragging yesterday into tomorrow. There are moments when God does not explain. He requires trust. This is one of those moments you may not fully understand why the warning feels urgent now, why your heart feels pressed, why your spirit feels stirred beyond comfort. But obedience does not wait for full understanding. Obedience responds to recognition. And deep inside you recognize this voice. It is not foreign, it is familiar. It is the same voice that guided you before. The same voice that corrected you when you drifted. The same voice that carried you when you were weak. God is asking you to stop measuring your life by visible success and start measuring it by spiritual alignment. You can be busy and still be disobedient. You can be productive and still be misaligned. You can be admired by people and still be distant from God. None of that impresses heaven. Heaven responds to humility. Heaven responds to obedience. Heaven responds to a heart that trembles at God's word and moves when He speaks. Some of you have been surviving on yesterday's obedience. You remember what you surrendered years ago, but you have not asked God what He wants surrendered now. But obedience has an expiration date. What honored God in one season may not be sufficient in the next. God is progressive in purpose. He calls you deeper, not backward. And every deeper calling begins with a warning. You cannot carry this forward. There are things God is stripping away. Not because they are evil, but because they are excessive. They take too much space, too much energy, too much attention. God knows you cannot run at full speed carrying unnecessary weight. And when God warns you to release something, it is not loss. It is preparation. What feels like subtraction is actually positioning you for multiplication you cannot yet see. God is not interested in surface change. He is confronting roots. That is why the warning feels uncomfortable. Roots are hidden. They are deep. They are connected to patterns you normalize. But God does not heal what you hide. He heals what you surrender. And surrender is not a feeling. It is a decision. A quiet, firm decision to say, God, I trust you more than I trust my habits, my logic, my fears. Some people are afraid to listen because they already know what God will say. They know He will ask for something they enjoy, something they lean on, something they built identity around. But what you cling to can become what confines you. God never removes without replacing. He never closes without opening. But He will not negotiate truth. He will not lower His standard to preserve your comfort. The warning before December 31 is also about urgency. Not panic urgency, but spiritual urgency. The kind that awakens discipline. The kind that sharpens focus. The kind that makes you value time differently. When you realize time is entrusted, not owned, you stop wasting it. When you realize breath is borrowed, not guaranteed, you start living intentionally. God is reminding you that delay is not neutral. Delay has direction. Every postponed obedience pushes you somewhere, even if you do not notice it immediately. And often by the time consequences appear, the warning feels distant. But God is speaking now so that you do not have to learn later through pain what you could learn now through humility. There is a holy seriousness in this moment. Not heaviness, but weight. The weight of responsibility, the weight of calling. The weight of knowing that your choices matter more than you admitted. God does not want children like this. He wants people He trusts with greater responsibility. If you feel the weight, it is because God sees capacity in you that you may not fully recognize yet. God is calling why? To clean alignment. Not partial obedience, not selective listening. Clean alignment. Where your private decisions match your public declarations. Where your thoughts are disciplined, not drifting. Where your words carry integrity, not exaggeration. God is shaping you for stability, not just breakthrough. Breakthrough without stability collapses quickly. Stability carries you through seasons. Some of you have been asking God for clarity, but clarity already came in the form of correction. You wanted instruction, but God gave warning because correction protects more than instruction. Instruction tells you what to do. Warning tells you what not to continue. And sometimes stopping is more powerful than starting. God is also exposing misplaced trust. Trust in systems, trust in people, trust in routines, trust in yourself. None of those are evil, but none of them are ultimate. When God warns, He is re-entering your dependence. He's reminding you that security does not come from control. It comes from surrender. Control exhausts. Surrender strengthens. You were never meant to carry the future alone. God before you, but He does not drag you. He invites you to walk with Him. And walking requires agreement of direction. You cannot walk with God while insisting on your own path. Alignment is not compromise. It is cooperation. The warning also carries hope. Because if God did not care about where you were going, He would let you drift. But He intervenes because your destination matters. Your obedience matters. Your response matters. Heaven is invested in what you become, not just what you eve. Do not reduce this moment to emotion. Do not wait for the feeling to pass. Feelings fade. Convictions must be acted on. Write nothing down. Announce nothing publicly. Just decide. Decide in the quiet of your heart. Decide without applause. Decide without delay. God is watching for warmth right now. Not perfection, not eloquence, not strength. He is watching for response. A response that says, I hear you and I will not ignore you. That response changes everything. God is also confronting how lightly you have treated His voice. Familiarity can dull reverence. When you hear God often, It becomes easy to assume you can respond later, but every word from God carries weight, whether it comes gently or with urgency. God does not waste breath. When He speaks, heaven is attentive, creation responds. And when He speaks to you, it is not casual, it is intentional. This moment demands that you recover reverence for what God has already said. Some of you are waiting for a dramatic sign, but God is waiting for disciplined obedience. He has already given direction. Now He is testing consistency. Faith is not proven in moments of excitement, but in quiet follow-through. It is easy to feel stirred when words are powerful. It is harder to remain aligned when no one is watching. God is not moved by temporary intensity. He honors sustained obedience. God is also addressing hidden compromises. Not the ones others see, but the ones you justified because no one confronted you. Small allowances you made for convenience. Subtle shifts in values you excused as maturity. But compromise always demands more later. What you allow today will ask for loyalty tomorrow. God warns early because He knows where unchecked compromise leads. He is protecting your future integrity. You must understand this clearly. God's warning is proof of His involvement in your life. Indifference would be silence. Correction is care. When God interrupts your comfort, it is because comfort has started to replace dependence. God does not want you self-sufficient. He wants you God-dependent. Self-sufficiency isolates, dependence aligns. There is also a call to spiritual maturity in this warning. God is shifting how He relates to you. He is no longer repeating the same lessons. He expects discernment now. He expects responsibility now. He expects why. Oh, to recognize His voice without needing constant reassurance. Growth means fewer explanations and more accountability. God is also exposing how fear has shaped some of your decisions. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of change. Fear disguises itself as wisdom, but it always shrinks your world. God's warnings never come from fear. They come from foresight. He sees beyond what you fear and invites you to trust His perspective over your emotions. You may feel tension because obedience will disrupt your plans. But plans that cannot survive obedience were never aligned with God's will. God is not asking you to destroy your life. He is asking you to realign it. Alignment may cost you convenience, but misalignment costs you peace. God is reminding you that you cannot carry spiritual authority while ignoring spiritual discipline. Authority flows from alignment. Power flows from surrender. When you resist God's warning, you weaken your own foundation. When you respond, you strengthen it. Some of you sense that God is narrowing your path. That is not restriction. That is focus. Wide paths invite distraction. Narrow paths produce clarity. God is simplifying your life so that you can move with precision. What feels like limitation is actually refinement. God is also asking you to stop outsourcing responsibility. Stop blaming seasons, people, history, or circumstances. Ownership is maturity. When God warns, He is calling you to take responsibility for your response. You cannot control everything, but you can control your obedience. This warning is also about alignment of desire. God is not only concerned with what you do, but with what you want. Desire shapes direction long before action does. God is purifying motives because impure motives corrupt even good actions. He is teaching you to want what aligns with His will, not just to do what looks right. God is also speaking about preparation in secret. What you do privately in response to this warning will shape what happens publicly in the next season. Public outcomes are born from private obedience. If you dismiss this moment quietly, the consequences will surface loudly. If you honor this moment quietly, the reward will also appear in time. Do not underestimate the power of a single obedient decision made in humility. History changes through quiet obedience long before visible results appear. God works through alignment, not noise, through surrender, not spectacle. God is also inviting you to rest, not in inactivity, but in trust. Striving is a sign of misalignment. When you align with God, effort remains, but anxiety decreases. Peace returns because direction is clear. God's warning is not meant to burden you. It is meant to relieve you of what you are never meant to carry. There is also a call to courage. Obedience requires courage when it contradicts logic, trends, or expectations. But courage fueled by trust in God is never wasted. God honors courage that chooses alignment over approval. This is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming who God intended you to be before distractions reshaped you. God is restoring clarity, restoring focus, restoring reverence, and it begins with listening. Truly listening and responding without delay. The warning still stands. The invitation remains open. The moment is still yours to honor. God has spoken. The rest is decided by your response. God is also challenging the way you have defined success. Success without obedience is failure in disguise. You may have gained ground in visible ways, but God measures progress by alignment, not applause. Heaven does not celebrate speed. It celebrates direction. God is asking you to slow your soul enough to check where you're actually heading. Momentum without guidance leads to exhausting. Guidance without haste leads to fulfillment. There is a sacred pause. God is inviting you into a pause that recalibrates your spirit. Not inactivity, but attentiveness. When God warns, He is inviting you to step out of automatic living and into intentional walking. Automatic living reacts to pressure. Intentional walking responds to truth. God wants you responsive, not reactive. Some of you have mistaken resistance for rejection. When doors became heavy, you assume God was distant. But resistance is often redirection. God resists what would drain you later. He blocks paths that look promising but lead to compromise. His warning is a guardrail, not a wall. It keeps you on the road that preserves your purpose. God is also calling you to refine your inner life. Public discipline without private devotion creates hollow strength. God looks at what shapes you when no one is watching, what you meditate on, what you tolerate, what you entertain. These silent choices build the foundation of your future. God's warning is aimed at your inner architecture, not your image. Do not underestimate the danger of drifting values. Drift is subtle. It rarely announces itself. It happens through small permissions you grant yourself. God warns because drift is harder to detect than rebellion. Rebellion confronts you openly. Drift slowly carries you away while convincing you that nothing has changed. God is calling you back to the center. There is also a word about humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking rightly about God. When humility is present, warnings are welcomed. When pride rises, warnings feel offensive. God resists pride not because He is harsh, but because pride blinds. Humility restores sight. God is teaching you to value correction as protection. Correction feels sharp in the moment, but it saves you from deeper wounds later. God does not woo. ND to harm, He cuts to heal. Every warning is surgical, precise, timely, necessary. You can either submit to the incision or suffer the infection. Some of you are realizing that you outgrew certain spaces, conversations, and pursuits. Growth creates tension with familiarity. God is not punishing you. He is repositioning you. The warning is God's way of saying, do not shrink to fit what no longer fits you. Expansion requires separation. God is also addressing endurance. The next season will not be sustained by excitement alone. It will require endurance rooted in conviction. Conviction is what carries you when feelings fade. And conviction is built by responding to warnings when they come, not when consequences arrive. You may feel exposed by this moment, but exposure in God's presence is safety, not shame. He exposes to cleanse, not to condemn. What God reveals, He intends to heal. What He confronts, He intends to restore. But restoration begins with agreement. Agreement that His view is higher than yours. God is reminding you that obedience is not loss of freedom. It is the discovery of it. True freedom is found within alignment. Outside of it, freedom becomes chaos. Inside of it, freedom becomes purpose. God's warning is a boundary that protects your freedom, not restricts it. This is also a call to simplify faith, not to make it shallow, but to make it sincere. God is not impressed by complexity. He desires sincerity, a heart that listens, a will that yields, a life that responds. That is faith that moves heaven. Some of you have been waiting for peace to decide, but peace follows obedience. It does not precede it. If you wait to feel calm before you act, you may never move. God asks you to trust Him enough to act first. Peak. He will meet you on the path of obedience. God is also recalibrating your sense of timing. You have rushed some things and delayed author, but God's timing is precise. When He warns, it means the moment is critical. Missed timing costs more than missed opportunity. It costs momentum. It costs clarity. It costs ease. Responding on time preserves all three. Let this moment sober you without discouraging you. Let it awaken you without overwhelming you. God is not withdrawing His presence. He is refining your posture. He is not closing His hand. He is repositioning yours to receive. Everything in you that feels stirred right now is meant to move you toward action, not emotion, toward surrender, not sentiment, toward obedience, not explanation. God has already spoken with clarity. Heaven is waiting on your response. The warning still echoes. The door still stands. The moment is still alive. God has done His part. What happens next rests in how you choose to listen. Now the moment rests quietly before you. Not loud, not rushed, not forced, just waiting. God has spoken with clarity, with patience, with love that refuses to abandon you to drift. And now the question is no longer what God is saying. The question is what you will do with what you have heard. This is where truth stops being information and becomes decision. This is where conviction asks for courage. This is where faith asks for movement. Do not rush past this moment. Do not soften it. Do not explain it away. Let it search you. Let it settle into the deepest places of your heart. Ask yourself honestly and without defense where you stopped listening. Ask yourself where obedience became delayed, where reverence became routine, where surrender became selective. God is not asking you to condemn yourself. He is inviting you to realign yourself right now. Choose stillness over noise. Choose humility over pride. Choose obedience over delay. You do not need to fix everything at once. You need only to respond to what God has already shown you on. Each decision made in reverence can shift an entire future. One act of obedience can unlock peace you've been chasing for years. One honest surrender can restore clarity where confusion once lived. Let this be the moment you stop running from God's voice and start walking with it. Let this be the moment you release what God warned you about and embrace what He has been preparing you for. Let this be the moment you step out of automatic living and into intentional obedience. Not because you are afraid, but because you trust God enough to follow Him fully. Lift your heart toward God, not with rehearsed words, but with honest resolve. Say yes where you once delayed. Say yes where you once negotiated. Say yes where obedience felt costly. God honors yes spoken in faith. God meets those who choose alignment over comfort. God strengthens those who choose obedience over excuses. Carry this moment with you. Guard it. Honor it. Let it shape how you think, how you decide, how you live. Walk forward with reverence. Walk forward with courage. Walk forward with trust. God has warned because He cares. God has spoken because your life matters. God is near, attentive, and ready to guide those who listen. Choose to listen. Choose to obey. Choose to walk closer to